All right, action.
Thanks. Okay, I'd like to call to order and welcome everyone to the April 28th, 2020 meeting of the Berkeley Planning Commission. This is our first meeting conducted by video conferencing and not at City Hall. We welcome any members of the public joining us on Zoom, and we'll have instructions for commenting on agenda items or general comments if you'd like to provide those. We'll provide those at the first opportunity for public comment. So at this time, I would like to move on with the agenda and move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, flag.
There it is.
That works.
Okay, next up we have the roll call. Ms. Schluto, if you could call the roll, please.
Commissioner Buckler? Here. Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Kempner?
Here.
Commissioner Murad?
Present.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Trotto?
Here.
Chair Kapelansky?
Here. Okay, next up we have the agenda for this evening, the 28th. I don't have any amendments. I'm going to go down the line and ask each commissioner if they have any amendments to the agenda, and if you could just indicate yes or no, and then I'll ask for a motion after that. Commissioner Buckler?
No.
Commissioner Campbell?
No.
Commissioner Kempner?
No.
Commissioner Murad?
No.
Commissioner Patterson?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Trotto?
Nope.
Okay, so if no one has any amendments, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion
I'll
to
make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Murad, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Kempner. Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Kapelansky?
Yes. Welcome, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to move on. Next up is the approval of the minutes from the February 25th, 2020 meeting. I will do the same thing, kind of go around and ask anyone if they have any changes. I do not have any changes. Commissioner Campbell?
None.
Commissioner Kempner?
No.
Commissioner Murad?
Nope.
Commissioner Patterson?
No.
Commissioner Richardson?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
Nope.
Commissioner Trotto?
Nope.
Commissioner Buckler?
Nope.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes from the February 25th Planning Commission meeting.
Any second?
Support.
Okay. So motion made by Commissioner Buckler, supported by Commissioner Patterson. Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kapelansky?
Yes. Okay, next up we have communications. Ms. Schluto, did we receive any communications?
No, we did not.
Okay. Then I will move on to citizen comment, and this is a bit lengthy, just giving directions to people on how they can comment if they would like to comment on items. So the public will have the opportunity to speak on anything not relating to the agenda. To speak during public comment, participants that are participating in the webcast can utilize the raised hand function. by selecting Manage Participants on the bottom of your dashboard, then select the More button in the bottom right-hand corner. Our moderator will call your name aloud and unmute you so that you can speak. For those that have called in, you can be placed in the queue for public comment by selecting *9. Our moderator will announce the last 4 digits of your phone number for recognition and unmute you so that you can speak. Participants will have 3 minutes to speak as they would if we were meeting in person. Once your 3 minutes are up, you will be muted by our moderators. Additionally, comments can be submitted prior to or at this time to planning@berkleymich.net, where residents and community members can submit public comments as well. Your email must be able to be read in less than 3 minutes. Given the circumstances with the virtual space, we may not be able to read through all of the email comments, but know that we will have them stored and acknowledged on the public record. To participate in public comment, you can dial by phone at 1-312-626-6799 and enter the meeting ID 361089434. At this time, we will review any public comments. I will open an additional public comment period during the public hearing this evening, but if you would like to comment on the capital improvement plan or the master plan 2020 materials, I would ask for you to comment at this time. Aaron, did we have any emails to begin with that we received prior to the meeting?
No, we haven't received any emails.
Okay, do we have anyone from the public waiting in the queue to speak?
Not at this.
Okay. So seeing no one for public comment, I will close citizen comment and move on to our first order of business, which is a public hearing for proposed zoning text amendment to repeal section 138-603 of the zoning ordinance, which gives the building official and city planner the authority to grant dimensional variances during administrative review. Ms. Schluto, do we have a staff report on this before I move on to public comment?
Yes, I'd like to reference my April 22nd, 2020 memo that was provided to you in your packet. This is very similar to the discussion item that we reviewed at the February 25th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, wherein the public hearing was set by, directed to city staff to set the public hearing. In our zoning ordinance, currently section 138-603, the ordinance allows for the building official and the city planner to act as the zoning board of appeals in a limited capacity to grant dimensional variances. I have included the entire section 138-603 that's under consideration this evening within that memo for you to consider. Administrative dimensional reviews and variances are not a common tool. In fact, I have not met, I've looked through several community ordinances as well as talked to many city planners, community development directors, and attorneys, and there isn't any record of this tool being used in any other city ordinance. I do not, pardon me, the administrative variance does not allow for a public hearing or public comment, so neighbors who live adjacent to those types of properties wouldn't necessarily know that a variance was granted to the adjacent property. So this doesn't seem like it's fitting with the intent of the ordinance and how we want to conduct these types of reviews here in the city of Berkeley. So with that, at this time, I make a recommendation that Planning Commission recommend to City Council to repeal this section to eliminate this type of administrative review and leave these decisions solely in the hands of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so at this time I would like to move on to that portion of the matter. Again, the public has the opportunity to speak on anything related to the public hearing at this point. To speak during this public comment period, we would ask participants in the webcast to utilize the raised hand function by selecting Manage Participants on the bottom of your dashboard, then select the More button in the bottom right-hand corner. Our moderator will call your name aloud and unmute you so that you can speak. For those that have called in, you can be placed in the queue for public comment by selecting *9. Our moderator will announce the last 4 digits of your phone number for recognition and unmute you so that you can speak. Participants will have 3 minutes to speak, as they would if we were meeting in person. Once your 3 minutes are up, you will be muted by our moderators. Additionally, comments can be submitted prior to or at this time to planning@berkleymich.net, where residents and community members can submit public comments as well. Your email must be able to be read in 3 minutes. Given the circumstances with the virtual space, we may not be able to read through all of the email comments, but know that we will have them stored and acknowledged on the public record. At this time, I would like to take any public comments for the proposed public hearing. Erin, did we receive any emails on this topic?
No, we have not.
And is there anyone in the queue who would like to comment on this item?
No, there is not.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing and move on to commissioner comments. Since this is a public hearing, we want to make sure all the commissioners have the ability to get their comments on the record in a little bit more formal manner. So I will call on each commissioner individually for this public hearing. And I will begin with Commissioner Kempner. Any comments on this text amendment?
No, I agree with the idea of repealing it. I for basically all the reasons that Erin stated. I think this one's pretty easy.
Commissioner Murad? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that the public should have a chance to be able to comment about variances. So,
Commissioner Patterson?
I agree. I think it needs to be appealed.
Commissioner Richardson?
I'm in agreement. I think we should repeal this section.
Commissioner Smith?
I agree also. As it says here, as we talked about a couple of months ago, it is problematic because of the public notices or lack of public notice and lack of public hearing. So I agree it should be repealed.
Commissioner Trotto? All set? Matt, you're muted.
sorry about that. I agree also.
And Commissioner Campbell?
I agree.
And I have no additional comments as well. I think it makes sense to repeal. Is there anyone on the Planning Commission who would like to make a motion to that effect, recommending to the council that we repeal this section?
I'll try to do that. I move that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council to repeal Section 138-603 of the zoning ordinance.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Richardson, a second by Commissioner Smith. Any additional discussion on the motion? If you could raise your hand, please. Okay, seeing none, Ms. Schluto, can you call the roll, please?
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have the capital improvement plan. Is there a staff presentation on this item?
Yes, I'd like to reference the April 21st, 2020 memo that was also included in your packet. The capital improvement plan, the CIP plan, serves as the city's multi-year planning instrument. It's used to identify the priority needs and financing sources for public infrastructure improvements. We have included the Excel spreadsheet table that begins in the year 2020 through 2027. This is a six-year plan that documents several areas of projects, including city parks and facility improvements, municipal buildings, museum fire hall improvements, etc. The city manager, Matt Baumgarten, is in attendance to present the CIP and to answer any questions that you may have. A motion is necessary to adopt the capital improvement plan, so we're looking tonight for a recommendation to City Council to approve this, approve the capital improvement plan.
Thank you. Mr. Baumgarten, did you have any additional presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned in the memo, I would like to apologize. We've talked about years past about improving this process and coming to the Planning Commission earlier. Last year, we were able to bring this forth in March, so we could have some discussions in advance of the April meeting where a requirement, or well, approval was a requirement. In context of everything else going on, we weren't able to do that this year, and I apologize for that. So I am introducing this. I will go line by line as we traditionally do, and call out specific projects that we're particularly excited about in the immediate budget year. But of course, we'll entertain any questions at any point from the commissioners. I do have the Zoom minimized to the tiny screen, so I won't see hand raising. So anybody who wants to stop me, please just mention it verbally.
Mr. Baumgarten, if I may, if everyone can just wait until the discussion portion, and I'll try to keep track of who raises their hands.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Chair. All right, looking towards the capital improvement plan, starting at the beginning on page 1, you'll see on the first page, this one's fairly simple. We can go right to Kiwanis Tot Lot in the recreation section of the CIP, and note that we do have some updated playground and installations coming up. That's to the cost of $90,000. One thing you'll notice in the recreation budget is we did defer several projects to subsequent budget years. We do anticipate revenue shortages coming up this year as the world starts to reopen. We know that there's going to be drastic effects on the economy, and likely the city's primary source of revenue is both property taxes and certainly the state shared revenues coming from the state. All indications right now are that both are going to be affected, but we know for certain the more drastic effects are going to be on what we get from the states. There are two portions of that. First is the constitutional revenue sharing, and the second is the statutory revenue sharing. Constitutional revenue sharing is the monies guaranteed to municipalities based on sales tax. We know that we're going to see some pretty significant effects there. The statutory portion of the revenue sharing is an allotment based on whatever the legislature decides to move forward to local municipalities in their annual budgeting process. Traditionally, if you look 10 years ago to the recession of the 08, 2000, all the way probably up through 2014 before we kind of emerged from it, we saw the legislature quite frequently decided to shrink the statutory portion of the revenue sharing, and so the municipalities did not see a lot of that money. We anticipate the history to repeat itself in the context of this as well. So that's, long story short, is why you don't see a lot of repairs coming from the recreation budget. In fact, $90,000 is the only portion you'll see. There are some areas that we plan to proceed on. Certainly the Merchant / Oxford Park project proceeds. It's a grant funded project. We intend to move forward on that as much as we're able to in the recreation budget. Moving now to the library. You'll see that there's not a whole lot planned for the library. There's two simple projects. The first to be to reupholster some of the furniture that's available for the public. And the second will be to replace some of the back end furniture that staff utilizes. This is their sorting tables, the areas where staff actually physically do their work. Those are the kind of places that's well past their useful life. It's an inefficient setup. They actually have Formica that's bubbling in places. And so in order to make staff more efficient and help them do their jobs better in the library, we'll be replacing those items. And that's it for the library, very simple. The municipal building, we have a joint project with the DDA coming up. We're hoping to launch it in this budget year and then proceed into the 2021 budget year as well. That's for updated wayfinding signage across the city. Most of it is within the DDA's borders, but there is some projects that we have scattered around the rest of the city as well. That would be wayfinding signage, including in parks and gateway signage. And then and for the municipal city hall budget, let's see, we have the oldest portion of our city hall, the area that used to be the village hall, It has a traditional shingle roof on it. It has lost shingles. We do see some roof leaking there. We're going to be replacing that as well. We do have that covers the portion of the building that's dedicated to the museum, a couple of offices, and some storage spaces. So we're trying to keep all that as dry as possible. That wraps up the municipal building. Moving into public works now. As you'll see, I won't go item by item here, but as you'll see, there are a number of projects spread across several different budget years or several different budgets. Not only is the general fund come into play here, but also the major road fund, the local road fund, and the water and sewer account all come into play for this. Beginning of last year's budget, we started a sidewalk fund as well. We do a sidewalk project on a 15-year interval traditionally. This year, we're launching the start of a different approach to that project, where we're actually going to we'll have a sidewalk program going every single year. We'll just divide it by sections of the city. And this year, we'll be addressing the items that generally need immediate change. And so we'll do that for the 5 sections of the city, working back around. And in year 6, we'll be back in this section that we're starting this year to make the next round of improvements. So instead of waiting a full 15 years and doing everything all at once, we're able to have a little bit more sustainable approach to this, which we're excited about launching this year. Then you'll see there are other concrete repairs. One thing I do want to call attention to as well is in our infrastructure fund, which is the fund that was thankfully funded by the voters of Berkley in the 2018 election. The infrastructure mills will be put in a good use this year, and council actually just approved the scope of the project at their last meeting. We're going to be doing well over 100 different sites across the city and fantastic pavement repairs. And so you'll see that's loaded. That's in here as well. The very first item, tasked road millage fund. And then you'll see there's other improvements that are happening throughout. Some of the things we've will likely not happen this year, although we have a budget for them. It's going to be dependent upon the revenue picture that we have. One of those I'd like to call your attention to on the 3rd page of the CIP, adjacent house demolition and perimeter wall additions and repairs. The two together is about $60,000 worth of work. The city owns the first house south of 12 Mile on Bacon. And that is actually the last house before the yard starts. We've owned this house for a couple of years. We've used it for rental property. And so we've actually had a commercial leasing agent work with us on that. This year, we're looking at potentially demoing that house and expanding our yard as we look to overall redo the yard and gain some efficiencies over the years. The equipment that we depend on have changed, the services that we depend on have changed, and the current layout is cumbersome. It forces us to do a lot of little moves every time we want to free up equipment or store equipment for a season. So we just think we can get a better way of organizing the DPW space. Again, that's one of the ones that's a good example of a project that is absolutely revenue dependent, and not one that we would do if we do officially slide into a recession. That'll conclude my notes for the public works. Move on to public safety. We do see the repair of the HVAC system happening next year, but no immediate projects happening in this year. Most of public safety's large scale items or capital items actually can be found in their equipment replacement plan, which is separate from the CIP. Moving on then to Downtown Development Authority. As mentioned, there are a couple of things that they would like to do. These are also revenue dependent, so we won't see some of these projects happen if the revenues simply aren't there to support them. But you'll look to see there's replacements and updates to street furnishings, some facade improvement programs, as well as mentioned earlier, the wayfinding signage project. Want to call attention specifically to the streetscaping project and the facade improvement plan. These are both can be tied directly back to the DDA's downtown master plan, which was approved by the board. It has actually come before the planning commission as well. It laid out specific topic areas, specific goals and programs that would make the most of the DDA's TIF capture. And these are two of the areas that it specifically had mentioned as being good investment points. And that brings our grand total for this year's CIP to just over $4.4 million. All investments in the city of Berkeley.
All set then, Mr. Baumgarten?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, I want to open it up for Planning Commission discussion. This is not a formal public hearing, although we do have to make a motion on this. So instead of calling on each commissioner individually, I'll ask you to use the raised hand function under the participants tab in the Zoom platform. So if there's anyone that has any questions or comments at this time, please raise your hand.
I can't find the raised hand function.
So Matt, if you go at the bottom portion of your screen where it says participants.
Yep. For the raised hand. Okay.
Okay,
I have
so
one statement about the spray patching stuff. I know it's not my say on what to do, but I absolutely despise the roads that have been spray patched. I know that Public Works may like them, but every time I ride my bike down those roads, I find myself regretting it and wanting to go to a different road. Is there something better we can do than that spray patching stuff? One, it makes a disaster on the road, and two, what's left of the road afterwards looks worse than what's there before.
We haven't found a technology better than that right now. Outside of full-on cutting sections out and hot patching them, that seems to be the best way to fix them. But for the scope of the fixes that we need to make, that really is the best option we have available to us, and it is a little bit. It is superior to cold patch from our standpoint, because the durability of it. Cold patch doesn't seem to stay, and sometimes you also have that bumpy effect as well. But yeah, I know initially it's not much fun to drive over, and there's a bit of an art to it as far as getting it to be completely flush with the road surface. But unfortunately, it's the best option that we have available to us right now.
Yeah, my comment is in the last few months, I spent a lot of time walking and riding my bike lately, more than ever. And those roads, in my opinion, are no longer any useful roads. They're worse than what they were before. The spray patch, in my opinion, is actually making the roads worse. I'd rather just put up with the bumps in the road than actually deal with the spray patch. So that's my personal opinion, but hopefully it means something.
Commissioner Kempner has her hand raised.
Yep. Were you all done, Matt?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. Commissioner Kempner?
I was just wondering if we know where the sidewalk replacement is starting. What area is it going to start to move from?
There's the section that we refer to as Section 5, so it's the southwest portion of the city. We did some engineering studies down there and came up with that as our best first approach. I will make a note, though, the timeline on that is a little bit tentative because we do work off of a special assessment program for repayment for those sidewalks. It's a good deal for the resident because they can, they pay a much lower price. We utilize economies of scale and be able to sort of assess those to the taxes for a multi-year repayment. However, it's considering the economic situation that most people find themselves in. We very well might not launch that until the beginning of the spring construction season next year, while in this budget year, but we won't, we might forego this year. But that's where we plan to start when we do start.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised at this point. Is there any other commissioners who have any questions or would like to comment on the CIP?
So this is Commissioner Richardson, and I'm on the participant block there, but I can't seem to raise my hand.
That's okay. Just go ahead then.
All right, butt in. So I have several questions, some of which I think I'm just going to defer, but some are minor, some are a little more major, and they're directed to Matt. On the recreation portion, Merchants Park, $100,000 for a parking lot construction, street spaces in the next fiscal year. Matt, can you just describe the configuration of that parking so I can picture it? Is that just cutting additional spaces off the street on that site?
Yes, there's two areas that we're focusing on with that. One is the continuation, the south side of the parking spaces that are there all the way to the edge of the parcel. And the other side, and the other portion of that is a potential parking area following the same design, but on the north side. There's a section where the city owns, and then it becomes private property. But it would be perpendicular off-street parking for that.
Okay, and how many additional spaces?
My apologies, I don't have that count. I don't know if we're to that point in the design process yet.
Okay. Bear with me a minute. The Dorothea Pocket Park development, could you just kind of remind me what that is?
Certainly. There's a section of Dorothea that runs in between Coolidge and the school-owned property. That's an area that we've shut down for a couple of different events that the DDA have hosted. We're looking at a permanent closure there and creating a pocket park in that space.
Okay, I think
that's just south of if you're a foodie like myself, you know it's just north of Sugar Kisses. And for those that get their dry cleaning done at Camelot, it's just south of there. So it's that little stub piece of road there. It's usually where the Street Art Fest is based out of.
Okay, so it would just be the space that's occupied by the street now, or would it be expanded?
No, sir, just that space that where our street currently sits on. We still even maintain the alleyway because that's how we connect people to parking, publicly provided parking back there.
I'm sure we've talked about that in the past. I just needed to jog my memory on it. Thank you. Directing your attention to Public Works, and I just had a couple questions there. The money for the heavy spending for lead service line replacements. Can you either give me an idea of the scope of that project, how many lines we're talking about, or direct me to some information on the city's website where I can do my own homework on that?
Certainly. One of the things I want to mention off the top here is the reason that has expanded so much from years past is in response to formerly DEQ, now Eagle. There's some guidelines that they changed last year related specifically to the ownership of lead and copper service lines. So we anticipate, formerly we used to own the lines between the main and right with the stop box, about a foot past the sidewalk. Now with changes that Eagle has made, we now own that all the way up to the meter. And the meter is the first portion of this that's considered to be privately held. And so the city now, whenever we do a water main replacement program, we have to replace every lead service line all the way into somebody's home. Obviously, you can imagine that's become a much larger expense on us. And so that's why you see that has expanded so much. Now we have a general number there based on some of the estimates that we've seen. We're estimating, basically we estimate by percentage how many lines we anticipate happening over the course of a span of replacement. But we don't have specific projects listed here just yet. And that is our best bet for a certain linear footage of replacement.
Do you know how much that is estimated?
I think it's something close to the scale of what we did along like Harvard, where it's maybe one or two city blocks at a time. But I could follow up with some better information from there. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that. So moving further on down, I noticed an item here, stormwater audit and study preliminary estimate. Is that a portion of the county's program to encourage or require municipalities to upgrade their own stormwater requirements?
It's in response to a state mandated requirement, not a county one.
Okay, and what is that?
So it's basically it follows. There's an assessment that we need to do now, and now moving forward to assess not only the amount of the condition of the pipe, but also potential areas where water's getting in where it might not where it shouldn't be getting in. Being a combined sewer, we have not had to worry about that up to this point, but it is something that we now need to be able to study and report back to the state on.
Okay. A little further on down, I note that you have an item here for replacing outdated electric and emergency lighting in the garage. I trust that's going to be like LED lighting or energy efficient lighting. Is that vetted for energy efficiency?
That's correct, sir. In accordance with the energy plan that the Environmental Advisory Board put forth and the City Council adopted, that's absolutely what we'd be looking at as energy efficiency lighting.
Okay, and just speaking of the plan, the low-hanging fruit in the plan includes replacing the light bulbs. Also installing, there's a recommendation to install sub-meters in the buildings and to ID equipment that needs to be replaced and to begin to apply criteria to the replacement of that equipment. Is any of that reflected in this capital improvement plan, or can you just kind of comment on that?
Not specifically in that plan. A lot of those items we'll be able to do under a maintenance and building improvements budget. So there's no items in here in the capital improvements plan that would be reflected there. Some of those may end up in the equipment replacement program as we look towards replacing those items, but not specifically in the CIP.
Okay. So you answered some of my other questions. I think that's all the questions I had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Murad?
I know it's on the budget for down the road for DDA is the streetscape improvements. Is that specifically tied to one street, Coolidge, 12 Mile, both?
No, for the streetscape program, specifically the one updating outdated fixtures, that would be across both 12 Mile and Coolidge. That would be replacement of benches, trash canisters, any other streetscaping element that's starting to show its age, rust, cracked peeling paint, things like that.
Okay.
Is that all, Tim?
That's it.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands raised at this point. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? And to clarify, Aaron, are you asking for two motions on this one? An approval and a recommendation of approval? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, we're looking for a recommendation of approval to City Council for them to adopt it.
Okay. So if there's no other comments or questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
This is a recommendation
Yes.
to City Council. I recommend that approval for the 2020 to 2027 capital improvement plan. Recommend approval to City Council.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. If anyone would like to have any further discussion on the motion, please use the raise hand function. Okay, seeing no one, Ms. Schluto, can you call the roll, please?
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay, then we'll move on to our final agenda item, which is a Master Plan 2020 item. Review and consideration to disperse the community survey for the Berkley Master Plan. Ms. Schluto, do you have a staff report on this?
Yes, I'd like to reference the materials that I've included in your packet. It's really, this is an update to how we are progressing and give you an update on the community engagement efforts that we are still able to move forward with, even during the interesting circumstances of which we present ourselves now. We've modified our initial community engagement strategy, which included a lot of pop-up exercises. We had planned on going to every board and commission in the city, city boards and commissions, including meetings with PTA groups, moms and dads clubs, a number of drop-in pop-up exercises that we felt would be a really good way to get engagement from a number of people in the community that don't regularly engage with us. Given the change in circumstances that we are currently living with, we decided to try to modify our community engagement strategy and move forward as best we can. The only other alternative would have been to stop the master plan process altogether for a period of up to 6 months or more. And we really didn't want to halt the momentum, the good momentum and the positive feedback that we were getting through some of these exercises. So Carla Wortman has provided a brief 2-page memo discussing the action to date, including the pop-up exercises that we had conducted through some of the boards and the PTA groups, as well as how we are shifting that engagement during this shutdown. I have included the draft master plan community survey. This is expected to go public May 4th. We are going to be putting this out online, so it's going to be linked with the city website, our social media pages. We are going to be sending and mailing out to every property owner in Berkeley a postcard that details where to find the survey link, what the master plan process is in a very short, compact way, and also why the master plan survey is important. I have included that draft copy for any minor tweaks. The master plan steering committee has already given their approval with this, but we wanted to have feedback or any kind of, if there was a planning commission saw any red flags that needed to be tweaked, we wanted to make sure that we could incorporate those as best we can. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. So again, particularly since this is a discussion item, I will ask everyone to use the raise hand function. If you, for some reason, can't do the raise hand, you would just want to raise your actual hand. I'll try to get to everyone as best I can. Commissioner Buckler.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments. One, the last survey I think the city did, like, you could keep hitting it from the same IP address and answer it as many times as you wanted. Is there going to be a limit on the number of times that someone can answer the survey, like to a single IP address?
No, I mean, we're talking about that with Carla Wortman to see if we can track those. Really, we don't want to limit how many times from one IP address, just because there could be multiple people living in that household who have different opinions. If we can track their IP address, we can link it to what their opinions are and go from there. But we really don't have any mechanism to limit on people's responses.
Well, there are. We're just not going to do it. I mean, that's fine. There are ways to do that, but.
Can I interject for a second, Michelle? Could we track the IP addresses so that we're able to see at least if there's 20 responses from one IP address?
I talked to Megan at Carla Wortman this afternoon about that. I know SurveyMonkey can do that. I'm not familiar with the software that they're using. It's a different software, so she's looking into to see how that can work.
And then I just have on questions 3 and 4. My preference would be to limit that to the top 3, because we're not, if somebody goes in and checks them all, because a lot of them they're all great, they're fantastic. I want them all. Well, except there's some couple contradictory ones in there. But there's a lot. I think it'd be easier if we could limit that universe to maybe the top 3. It would give us better information. It just dilutes the pool if somebody picks 6 of them.
I can pass that along.
Thanks. That's it. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, I do have my hand raised, don't I? I'm so proud of myself. So I'm going to raise a couple of things that I did not raise at the steering committee meeting. I needed some time to digest the information, but not much. Directing attention to the parking questions, question 4, question 8. Question 4. Yeah, question 8, I guess. I would like a question in there or an option in there which captures the idea that parking might have to be reconfigured or done more efficiently. This kind of limits the choices to more parking, less parking, just right. I think that's too limiting. I think there should be an ability to think about, maybe less parking in some areas and more parking in other areas, depending on need. And of course, there is an option to write in your own comment, but my recommendation would be just to add a choice, to redo the parking map. They can come up with better language than me, but I would like to capture the idea of more efficient parking, I guess, as opposed to more or less parking. That's what I'm trying to drive at. And then there's some personal information at the end, including a question about race and ethnicity. And I'm just wondering if there should be, it should say optional next to that particular question about race, your ethnicity, just to remind people, to make people feel a little bit more comfortable about answering this. This is question 30 on page 11. I realize that we want to obtain as much information like that as we can, but I'm not sure everybody would be comfortable answering that. Obviously, this whole thing is voluntary, and you can pick and choose which questions you want to answer if you're going to answer it. But I think it might be better to remind people that particular information doesn't need to be included in order for the survey to be submitted. So those are my comments.
And if I could address those, number 8, parking has been identified as a concern throughout this entire process from every group that we've talked about. So these criteria are more to get an idea of how we can start to have those more hot topic conversations. As part of this overall process and engagement, we had planned on doing a multi-day charrette and workshops that would include discussing these elements in a more comprehensive and detailed environment. This is really just to kind of get the broad overview, 30,000 foot viewpoint of these topics. So we don't want to get too far into the weeds on a topic such as parking. We're just trying to limit the scope a little bit before we dive into it. And then for question number 30, there is an option there to choose not to answer. So if someone doesn't feel comfortable answering that question, they can certainly click that box, or it's not a required question at all. So they could just skip it entirely if they felt uncomfortable. Does that address your concerns?
Somewhat. No, these are just comments. And maybe they'll be of use as we go through the process, not just at this stage.
To follow up on the parking question comment, Aaron, so I didn't see an option that said parking is not an issue or something like that. It talked about needing more, or that there was too much, or too restrictive, not restrictive. I didn't see a just right option.
No, we didn't include anything that anything is just right, because we haven't discussed this with anybody who felt that that there wasn't a parking problem. We could certainly add that. I don't see any problem with adding another box. We're trying not to add anything too substantive to this survey, because we certainly don't want to bring it back to Master Plan Steering Committee and have additional delays getting this out to the public. But I don't see any problem with adding I don't see a parking problem, but.
Yeah, I know most people think that there is too much or too little or something, but maybe there are people who think that there's enough in the right spaces. Okay, Ms. Kempner.
That just made me think, do they have to answer every question on this? I mean, I know some surveys, if you skip, it goes, no, you can't move on.
No, let's see. The only questions that are required are at the beginning, and it's question 1, what is your relationship to the city of Berkeley? That's the only one that's required in the entire survey.
Okay.
Everything else, if you don't feel comfortable answering, then that's certainly your prerogative.
All set, Lisa? Okay. I don't see any. Oh, here we go. Mr. Patterson?
Nope.
And Mr. Smith, sorry.
No problem.
Let's do Mr. Patterson, then Mr. Smith.
I just have a question on number 5. How important is it the city of Berkeley to plan for housing for the following groups? I don't really see a group above 30 without children. Is that intentional, or so there's seniors and then young adults 18 to 30, but no 30 and above without a young family?
Well, that's a good point. They were kind of lumped into the young families with children under 5. That's just typically the age group of how that falls. But I think we could add a category, or at least modify it so it doesn't read quite so some skewed.
Right, because like I know some people are above 30 without children, so or above 30 and not disabled or low income. So that was my only thing when I was reviewing it.
Mr. Smith?
A couple comments. First of all, regarding the question 5, Mr. Patterson, I think our city already addresses couples with no children. I think what we're looking at is trying to bring, making the city housing convenient for these groups. Small families, couples without children. We have 6,500 homes in this town. And I think we already have homes for those people. That's just my impression. I don't think we want to single them out, because you could come up with another half a dozen categories of people. But I think those are already addressed with the existing housing stock. And I want to reflect what Ms. Buckler said earlier. I agree with both things she said. If there's a mechanism to avoid, for the lack of better words, ballot stuffing, I think we should look into that, because that kind of skews things. There are people out there that may have an agenda, and I think that if it's possible, it'd be a good thing to do. And as far as questions 3 and 4, if you check all that applies, it kind of dilutes the use of the question. If it's, again, what she mentioned, say the top 3, 4, whatever you want to pick, has a little more meaning than someone just checking them all off, because that really does dilutes the wants or needs of an individual filling out this application. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else right now. Is there anyone else from the commission who would like to comment on the survey? Okay, I don't see anyone. I had a couple comments. I would agree with Mr. Smith and Ms. Buckler about the selecting your top 3 or 4 for questions number 3 and 4. I think it would give us a better idea of what's most important and what we should prioritize. And then I had one other question regarding question number 24. So that was the where would you support new development of the following land uses? And I know this is probably not going to be a popular thing to say, but I didn't see an option for, and I realize probably not a lot of people are going to select this, but for duplex infill in existing neighborhoods.
I like it.
So I guess I'm thinking duplex or triplex is probably as far as anyone would ever consider for that, but is there a reason that that was left out?
Well, this type of question, I mean, are you talking about infill within the existing residential neighborhoods?
Yes.
So
Yes,
these
so
areas are limited to Coolidge, Woodward, 11 Mile, 12 Mile. We're trying to get this question was geared towards the corridors, not the infill of the residential development, residential neighborhoods.
Okay, because it doesn't say along which corridors would you support new development. It just says where would you support new development. I guess it's not clear then that you're just looking for information on the corridors. And I guess that leads me to a larger question of how are you collecting information then on residential infill?
Yeah, the corridor discussion begins back just before question 14. So all of the questions from 14 to 20 to 24 are specific to the corridors: Greenfield, Coolidge, Woodward, 11, and 12.
Okay, so then how are we collecting information on potential residential infill opportunities?
So we do have. So question number 6, we have how important is it for the city of Berkeley to plan for the following types of housing? So we do have duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, things of that nature. So that question is included in the housing section.
But are we collecting an opinion from the public on whether or not they would support residential infill? I feel like that's a very important question.
Well, I mean, it's how important are they to plan for these? So, I mean, if we ask these types of questions and see if that there's a lot of interest in these triplexes, quadplexes, and the infill, that's something we can again discuss at when we get to the workshop, the charrette discussions later on. As demonstrated, these are the types of housing that people were interested in, and we can move forward with more refined questions and more refined review of those types of infill. But this was a little bit more of to get their input on whether or not they would support it in any area of the city.
Okay, I get where you're getting at. I think I'll kind of agree to disagree that we should have maybe addressed that the city was willing to look at potentially at least examine whether or not the opportunity and appetite for residential infill in small amounts was on the table. I don't know that that's entirely clear here. The other question I had is, so obviously we're all, it's a big question mark, what's going to continue and what's going to go on in terms of charrettes and public gatherings and all of those things. So if a few months from now or 6 months from now, we're not able to have those types of gatherings and opportunities for public comment, will the strategy on how to collect public comment shift? I'm just wondering how much weight this survey is going to be given if we're not able to get together for open houses and charrettes.
Well, we are, modifying and tweaking our community engagement strategy based on the current circumstances. We do anticipate that a lot of the social distancing and the limiting number of groups is going to continue. The Michigan State University held a webinar this afternoon about conducting a virtual charrette. It was done in Missoula, Montana, just a couple of weeks ago. That was proved very interesting. So that's something that we're going to be discussing with Carlisle Wortman moving forward if we can't do something like that. But we don't know how long these executive orders to social distance or to not occupy limit numbers of groups. We don't know how long that's going to last. So we kind of have to play a little bit loose in terms of it, but this is certainly not going to be the only method of engaging the public. We really want to make sure that we have done as much as we possibly can. We've had a number of virtual stakeholder discussions via Zoom meetings. We're going to continue to have those. We're trying to set those up with some students from Berkeley High School as well as a number of seniors. So we're still trying to move forward with some of these ideas that we had in the beginning of this entire master plan process. The intent of the survey is to get a really broad overview of everything, and then hopefully later on we can narrow those discussions. If we can't have a charrette or a workshop, then we're still going to try to figure out a way to make that happen so we can get into the nitty-gritty details of some of these larger scope discussions.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Buckler?
Thank you. I'm going to beat on that horse a little bit more of Chairman Kapolansky's comments on items number 6 and 24. So I read them, and except for the items regarding accessory dwellings and tiny houses, there's nothing new on that list that we don't already allow for in our current master plan. And the same goes for item number 24, where would you support new development of the following land uses? Almost all of those corridors allow for some form of those land uses along them now. So they're zoned for almost all those land uses in some way, shape, or form along those corridors. And really that becomes private development. Of course, our zoning encourages then that development. So I don't think these questions tell us anything. They're asking questions to the public like, yeah, I'd love to see a new movie theater. Yeah, we can put a movie theater in. Financially, it doesn't make any sense for anybody to open a movie theater. Maybe with the new world order and a new design for pandemic, somebody may find something that makes money. But there's a reason why we have the developments that we have, because that's where people want the private dollar goes. So I don't think these questions tell us anything. The master plan isn't a wish list of, well, let me back up. We tried in the downtown development portion of the master plan to do some visioning, and that did not go over well with the public because they're like, well, you can't put it out there if it's not going to happen. I really think there needs to be more specific questions, and getting back to what Chairman Kampolansky said about, hey, can we move some multi-residential infilling into these neighborhoods to help flush them out and see how that goes? Because if somebody checks off, where would you support new development of the family, the following land uses? Office on Coolidge, on Woodward. It's pretty low. What does that tell you? They tell you they want more offices, they want less offices. I think they can be checked off. We could get people who check off all of these across the board, and you're left with, I can't even count, 3, 6, 9 times 5, 45 answers. And what do you do with that information? What does it tell you if they check off these boxes when our zoning already allows for this in our current master plan? That's the question. So I had a very, very smart man who was my boss for many years, lovely Southern man. And he's like, Michelle, never ask the question unless you're ready to deal with the answer. And that's what we're dealing with here. Like, what is this? What do these answers tell us? And what are we going to do with that information when we get them? So I think that it's too generic, this survey, at this point in the planning process with what we've had. And unless we can limit the input per IP address, I think it's just going to get rigged. That's what I think we're going to get. I think we're going to have multiple answers coming from a few sources who repeatedly kind of put it in there. I don't know. And then you can't ignore it. Like, you can't go back and say we saw 30 from the same IP address, so therefore it's discounted. Because it could be the public library, the IP address. I don't know. Could be that's where they're picking up Wi-Fi. It could be a school or something. I don't know. Could be a shared apartment building. I don't really know the answer. I don't know that this is ready to launch personally. So that's it.
Okay, before I get to you, Ms. Kempner, just a follow-up question or comment on Ms. Buckler's comments. She just kind of raised a good point in my mind about the downtown master plan. So why are we looking at what people prefer along the corridors that have already been examined and kind of recommended for the downtown master plan? We've kind of already done that part.
Well, it was a matter to make sure that we kept it as part of the discussion going through. It's not the sole point of our discussion, but we certainly can't ignore certain areas of the community, even though they've already been discussed. That's.
But we're not thinking that the master plan will change the recommendations or be contradictory to the recommendations of the downtown master plan, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
they'll work off of each other.
So, okay, maybe if you could follow up with Carlisle and get a little bit more explanation of how that works, because the downtown master plan is very detailed. So unless we're changing things in it, I guess I'm not sure why we're looking at those corridors that we just looked at, a year ago. Ms. Kempner?
So, I did bring up when we were talking about this survey, and really we're talking about, what information they've gathered so far, that we needed to kind of focus the conversation on what our multifamily housing is going to look like as a city, right? Where is it going to be? Are we talking duplexes, triplexes, small apartment buildings? The indication I got from them is the survey is just kind of a very brief look into the issues around the city, and then they want to work that kind of stuff because they know it's a hot button topic in more detail in group meetings, whether that is like Zoom breakout meetings or charrettes or what have you as we move on in the process. I don't know if that helps or anything, but it is on their radar, even if it doesn't look like it's a super focus in the survey.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Any other comments on this? Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, Ms. Shelto kind of reminded me, and Ms. Kemner as well, that we shouldn't interpret this step as the defining step in this process. It's a preliminary step, and I think our consultant wants to know what they're dealing with in terms of community opinion. I think they want to know, what people's attitudes are toward development in the community. But there's a lot more work to be done from there, and it may involve actually attempting to shape community opinion around certain options that aren't reflected in the survey. We're not. I don't think they're going to use the survey to derive or recommend that we use the survey to derive the drafting of the plan. It's a tool. It's part of the database. Gives us an idea of what people are feeling. I do agree with Michelle's comments about being very careful about who's answering it. Limiting the IP address or whatever steps can be taken to make sure that we don't get bogus information. So let's say not make too much of this survey at this point. It's an information and attitude survey, survey of attitudes, and it's kind of a baseline data gathering exercise. At least that's the way I understand it. I don't know how I'm kind of contradicting what I said earlier, but I don't know how precise we need to be at this point. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Just one little follow-up. The only reason is I recall that there was room for, I thought, one survey in the proposal from Carlisle Wortman. There's just limited resources, and I feel like if you ask opinions that they should drive towards something. And we had a community meeting where people kind of gave a lot of ideas. We had the dots on the boards and things like that to kind of help corral some of the cats, if you would. A couple of months ago, I can't remember when that was, November. And I don't know, like, if we're going to get to do a second survey or if it'll all get done from small charrettes, which will be probably less attended than the participation we'll get on this survey. So I just think there's limited resources here. They don't have $1 million to drive this project forward. It's really not a lot of consulting fees for the size project it is.
Thanks. Mr. Trotto?
I just looking at, there's no place to actually name like the name and address of the people who are filling it out. I know they might want this to be, unknown, but it would limit the amount of people who actually do click and just click repeatedly on things. I know you're using IP addresses, but IP addresses create a problem because if you're doing it at the library or if you're doing it someplace else, you could have multiple people doing it. But if you have the name and address of the person who's doing it specifically, and you'll see that person, who everybody knows in Berkeley, there are several people who like to stand up and scream, does it 700 times, it would definitely skew your results. And if you see that one person doing that, then you can at least say, hey, that doesn't really, it's ruining our data.
Well, if I may, there is a space, the last few questions, there is an option to give your name and address, but also, I'm sorry?
But it's optional.
It is. And the point of the survey is that it's the opportunity to be anonymous. You can give your opinion without any fear or any kind of reservation of recourse of putting your opinions out there. I don't know if everyone saw, but we had a Facebook poll that got personal very quickly. So when you put yourself into a public forum and you give a maybe not wildly loved opinion, a lot of people aren't going to give that opinion whether or not they have it because they have that fear or that nervousness that they're going to be attacked in a public forum. So this allows to get a lot of questions and a lot of things answered on what people think in an anonymous setting that isn't afforded throughout the rest of the process.
This is not a published thing for every single person who's putting it out there. It's a survey that someone's going to complete and it's going to be analyzed by Carlisle Wortman. And if you have one person who fills it out 700 times, or if you have one person who fills it out one time, that person who fills it out 700 times has a mission to skew the data. And if they put their name and address on there 700 times, you know that they're out for something. Whereas if you have somebody who fills it out and they're a legitimate citizen, they fill it out one time, then that opinion should count more than the person who fills it out 700 times.
Okay, well, I would argue that if we're going to make adding your name and your address as a requirement, then what's to stop someone from saying, from just creating a false identity? That doesn't hold anything. And I mean, this is a 30 some odd question survey. This is going to take quite a bit of time for each person to fill out if they're going to have that type of motivation to skew it.
I mean, they could just basically go through and pick out the 3 or 4 questions they want to answer and do it several times without a problem. And by the time
this isn't going to be the only point of engagement that we're going to be doing throughout this whole process. We're going to be doing a lot of other engagement activities in order to collect as much information and input as we possibly can.
I mean, it's just you're doing this to gather data, and it's going to gather inaccurate data, in my opinion. I know how this city is. I know how the people are in it, and some people have a mission to get their point across, and it's going to get across one way or another, even if it doesn't agree with what everybody else wants.
Okay, so anyone else that wants to comment on this? No. Okay. So I assume then that we'll just get a future update on the results of the survey and the next steps and how public input will be continued to be gathered as all of this progresses.
Yep, correct? I will be passing along your comments to Carlisle Wortman in an email tomorrow morning. So if there are any minor modifications or changes that we can, minor tweaks that we can do to address some of these concerns, we can do that. But the survey is going to be going out May 4th. So you will be receiving an email blast notifying you of the link, as well as you'll receive a postcard in the mail with that survey link. So look forward to those.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I will move on to liaison reports. If anyone could raise their hand if they have anything to report. Mr. Trotto.
I actually did attend the DDA commission, DDA meeting this month. Although it was rather relaxed and kind of quiet, they did talk about some of the issues coming up with COVID. They talked about, basically the treasury and that kind of things that are going on with the accounting of the DDA. The one thing they did talk about a lot was the impact of COVID and how people are getting funding from the government and a couple other things, but it really did not have much to say about what the DDA is planning on doing. They're right now just kind of dealing with the issues of the current COVID situation. That was
Okay,
it.
thanks. Mr. Murad.
So I've attended 3 chamber meetings actually. So the one in March was actually the last in-person meeting I've had. So we did talk a little bit about the coming social distancing and such. And then we've had 2 very difficult, really difficult meetings. The first one, our regular meeting here in April, where we had to make the tough decision to cancel the Art Bash, cancel the Berkley Bucks, and then we just had a meeting last Wednesday, an emergency meeting to cancel the Street Fest, or the Street Art Fest. So, and those 2, the last 2, the Art Bash and the Street Art Fest are big money makers for the chamber. So chamber's gonna have some tough decisions to make moving forward. So
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
So that was those were the tough things. So
Okay, thanks for those updates. That is too bad. I'm sure everyone's going to miss those events. I know I will. Any other updates or liaison reports? Okay. I will open it up for commissioner and staff comments. I will just go through the list and just let me know if you have anything to add. Commissioner Buckler?
Nope, thank you.
Commissioner Campbell?
I just want to thank the staff for putting the Zoom meeting on. Thank you.
Commissioner Kempner?
Nothing to add.
Commissioner Murad?
nothing more to add.
Commissioner Patterson?
Nothing to add.
Commissioner Richardson?
Done for tonight.
Commissioner Smith? Oh, you're muted. Go ahead.
Muted? Oh, I
You're
just
good now.
want to say I look forward to getting back to our normal type of meetings. This is very cumbersome, but it does work, and staff did a good job putting it together. Thank you.
Commissioner Trotto?
The most recent DDA master plan, what is the status on that? Has that been approved by City Council?
Are you asking if it's been adopted?
Yes.
I believe so. Is that correct, Ms. Schluto?
It was. Yes, the DDA master plan has been adopted.
Okay. And is any of that information being used in the current master plan?
Yes, Carla Wortman received the copy of it shortly after adoption. They reviewed it. They had given their review and analysis of what was contained in it, and that was discussed at one of our earlier master plan discussion meetings.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Ms. Schluto, anything else to add?
No.
Okay, I will just echo the comments about thanking staff for putting this together. I know it's a lot of behind the scenes work, so thank you everyone at the city that has gone ahead with that. At this point, the May meeting will be, as far as we know, at City Hall, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then,
Fingers crossed.
yeah, stay tuned, I guess, for updates on the city's website and other avenues of communication if that changes. Sure, that's all dependent on what the governor decides to do. So that brings us to adjournment. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Any seconds?
Or
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the adjournment. Ms. Shuto, could you call the roll, please?
Oh, Commissioner Patterson,
yes.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Trotto,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckler,
Yes.
Commissioner Murad,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell,
Yes.
Chair Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thanks again to staff for organizing. And we hope to see you all in person in May. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.